Hi, my name is Michael White, and I'm going to take you on a tour through the J37 Tape Saturation plugin by Waves. The J37 is a recreation of the same tape machine that was used in Abbey Road studios to record many of the classic records of the 60s and the 70s. This was the first multi-track tape machine produced by Will Studer, who would go on to create many of the industry standard tape machines that were used in the decades that followed. The J37 is a 4-track 1-inch tape machine, and it's unique in that it was flat up to 18 kilohertz and also maintained 52 vacuum tubes that were used to help shape the tonal characteristic of the tape machine that Waves has faithfully recreated in this plugin. The input gain is the first place where you will start when you work with the plugin, and this will help to set the saturation state of the audio signal that you're bringing in. You have 3 tape formulations to work with, 2 tape speeds, and 3 bias current selections that you can apply. So just between these options right here, you have a wide variety of tonal characteristics and colors that you can maintain. There are also 2 modeled tracks, which are the interior tracks in the middle of the tape, as opposed to modeling the edge tracks, which would be a bit less stable. You also have controls for wow and flutter, which allow you to create some unique effects. The noise level, which allows you to add in tape hiss for that real classic vintage vibe. A separate tape saturation control here. So this is a saturation control that is independent of the input, output, and tape formulation controls that you would have normally up here. You also have a pair of meters here, and you can set the, by clicking on the little screw here on the meter, you can actually set the standard to be other than -18, which is the default industry standard, and a whole separate delay section that allows you to use the plugin on an insert or as a send return, and with delay times that are set up here just above there. Okay, so let's start by getting a little sound through here and just listening to what the basics of this is like. So when we first start here, we're going to start by working in some of the basic levels here at the input stage, and we'll keep it linked so that the output will follow accordingly. So as if I really want to saturate, I can really kind of get into a bit of heavy distortion there if I like, or I can get a more open sound. Now, the next thing that you will probably do here will be to select the tape formulation that you like. There are 3 tape formulations that are provided here by Waves, and they were all created by EMI. In the early 60s, the 888 tape formulation was created, and it has a bit of more of a lo-fi, grainier kind of quality and a bit of a distortion characteristic in the mid-range frequencies. When you go up to the 811 formulation, this was created in the mid-late 60s and by EMI, and this has a better, flatter frequency response and less distortion overall. And then in the early 70s, the 815 formulation was created by EMI, and this formulation is the cleanest and flattest of all of them and the lowest distortion. So essentially, when you first enable the plugin or instantiate the plugin, you're setting your input gain structure, but then you could decide what direction that you want to go. If you want something that's more gritty, maybe you head towards the 888. If you want something that's more open and clean, you're going 815. And if you want something that's in between, maybe you go to the 811. You also have the tape speed control. Now, the tape speed on any analog tape machine will shift the frequency response. So what you'll find is that at 7.5 inches per second, you'll get a thicker low end and a little roll off on the high frequencies. So the high frequencies will have a tendency to be warmer, whereas the 15 inches per second will be a bit flatter on the low end and a bit more open on the top end. So you can make some selections there. In addition to all the tape formulations, you can also select the bias current that's being used. Now, the bias is a high-frequency carrier signal that allows the audio to be imprinted on the magnetic particles of the tape more accurately. And without getting into a whole technical detailed description of how this works, essentially you have a frequency which is applied that's well above the range of our human hearing, and it's applied at a high level. And this high level helps to get the oxide particles actually modulating between their positive and negative polarities. So when the audio signal is applied, it actually sticks. So in a way, it's kind of getting the particles moving so that when the audio signal is applied, it's applied more accurately. Now, what you'll find here is that when you go to a nominal bias, you'll get the most open, clean sound in terms of the high frequency response. And as you increase the bias current to +3 or +5, especially with these older formulations, what you'll find is that the low end has a tendency to warm up and have a bit more harmonic distortion in it, and the high frequency response will have a tendency to get warmer as well. So from here, you can set your saturation state by determining what the bias current is going into the tape machine. Now, the one other thing that we'll get into here is selecting the modeled tracks. So if we select just 2 or 3, we'll get a slightly varied tonal characteristic in the sound, and then we can decide if we want to make that this way, which would keep them exactly or identical equal, which will kind of give you maybe a little bit truer response to the original audio signal in terms of the way that it images. Or if you go to 2 + 3, then track 2 will then be the left channel, track 3 the right channel, and what you get is a little bit more of a spread in the stereo imaging, just a slight variation that you can hear. So let's run a little audio here and go through some of the options here. So we'll start with the 2-3 here, and then I'm going to bring up the input level here so as we kind of go through some of the different tape formulations, we can hear a little bit more of the distortion. So this is the 815 formulation. And then to the 888. So you'll hear like a slightly varied tonal characteristic with each. And then if we go up to different bias currents here, you can hear more of the distortion there in the 811. And a bit more distortion there in the 888. And here you get the more open sound of the nominal bias. You can really hear the warming effect that has, right, on the bias and how it kind of limits a lot of the transient peak material more effectively. We also have the ability to go to 7.5. And you can really hear kind of some of the distortion kind of kicking in a little bit more accurately or more definitively here. So I'm going to back it off just our input level just a little bit. And you can hear that you know, the tonal characteristic can shift a little bit more dramatically depending upon the program material. This is just on the mix bus. So you can hear the difference in openness between 15 and 7.5. So here, these are just some of the basic controls that we can work. So let's start with something maybe that's a little bit more open and rich here for this thing, a little bit cleaner, you know, less gritty sounding with the 815. And then let's just listen to the difference between the modeled tracks here. So this would be 2-3. This is track 2. And that's track 3. You hear the slight difference there. In this particular program material, track 3 seems to be more open, and then I can spread it. And you can hear that how that opens up the stereo field a little bit. So what's really interesting here is you really have a lot of variation, just all of the available options between the modeled tracks, the formulation, the tape speed, the bias current, and then how you set the input level. So you may find as you go to a certain thing, like if we go to something that's a little bit heavier of a distortion characteristic, we can really decide how much of that we want and start to back off on the input level to kind of control that. Right, so maybe we want a little bit of a grittier, kind of add an edge to this a little bit more. And then in addition to that, we can add in a saturation. Right, so there we can throw that on top of what's already there. So even if we're going with a cleaner, more open sound here with the 815 and the 15 inches per second, you know, we can add just a touch of edge there, which is kind of nice. right? And you can really hear how that just opens up the sound and the depth of the music there, which I think is really great. It's an amazing plugin. So let's kind of move on here to a couple things. This is just on our stereo bus, so I'm just going to bypass this temporarily. And let's go on to some other things that you can work with here. So just to show you some other options here, I think what I'm going to do is go to the Rhodes track here, which I think you may have heard a little bit of here. And this is just to show you a little bit about how you can play with the wow and the flutter effect here, and then we can also add in a little saturation if we want. So this is the normal Rhodes track on its own. And then here, by just implementing a little bit of wow and flutter, a little bit of depth into it with the rate. And what I'll do is I'll even just reset it so you can kind of hear it. And because this will be the default wow and flutter that was emulated from the plugin itself, right? So let's start by bringing in some depth here and take the bypass, right? So you can really hear how, there's pretty broad depth there. So this starts to get into alien territory, right? But now what I can do here is I can back this off. And I also have a little bit of flutter here. So I'm just going to put this back because that may be affecting what we're hearing here. All right, so you can create this nice little modulation effect and control it by the depth. So this is like a frequency modulation kind of thing. So the wow is the effect of the motor mechanisms not pulling the tape machine through, or the tape through the machine mechanism evenly. So it may be varying in speed, and there are many reasons why this can happen based on the thickness of the tape and the quality of the motors and all of that sort of stuff. So that's one way to do it. So we can add this nice little nice little, I guess what really amounts to kind of a tremolo effect. And then we can also add a vibrato effect here as well. So this is just kind of, I'm kind of playing around with it a little bit here. So between that, now what you have is something that's more of a vibrato effect. So you have the vibrato and the tremolo effect here, which is basically frequency modulation or amplitude modulation, and kind of play with that. And that actually allows for, for some, taking and shaping a sound maybe in a way that you wouldn't expect, where you might, call up some other kind of plugin. And this, you have the ability also with this to start to saturate it. Give it a little bit of edge. We could also drive the, the tape a bit harder on this side, go to different tape formulations. All right, so we can go a little bit more grainier and lo-fi with the 888, 7.5. All right, and create all kinds of other, create completely different effects through it. So this is kind of it's a very cool plugin. You could hear like the depth in terms of like the amount of dynamic control that you might not have just on a simple like a modulation kind of plugin. So that ability to really shape the sound so dramatically here is quite cool. Another way to use the plugin, and I'll show you this in a couple of variety of ways, is to use the tape delay. And the tape delay actually has two basic settings that you can operate from. So hold on a second, just cue up my audio here. And the way that it works is you can operate it as an insert or a send return mode. Okay, and then when you select insert or send return, then you have three different types or variations here. So if we operate, we can actually link the left and right audio here if we like, and we can also work in sync, right? So we can actually set musical delay timings here, and if we unlink them, then we can set them to varied delay times, right? So maybe I kind of play with this, and it helps if I solo up the guitar track instead of the Rhodes. Okay, so we have a little bit of reverb naturally. Now what I can do is I can this would be now setting the level of the delays. And then I can, vary my delay time. So maybe I have... All right, so here I'm going to go to a shorter delay. I have an eighth note on that side, so let me just kind of back off. Let's see if we go to an eighth and a 16th. And that would be in slap mode. And then, of course, I have the ability to employ a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter on those. And then I can saturate them. Now, in insert mode, this is also going to be affecting the original signal as well, not just the delays. All right, so I have that interesting effect. Now, I can also work in, if I don't want to work just in a straight delay kind of situation, which is the slap mode, I can also work in a feedback mode. And now my controls here become my feedback percentage. Right, so you can start to hear the... And then I can also work in ping pong mode, and this would kind of bounce the signals left and right. And so again, here what I'm doing is I'm getting is a percentage control. Right, which would move the signals or the delays back and forth between the left and the right side. So in insert mode, the limitation would be your ability to control the delayed signal independent of the dry signal. So when you work in insert mode, the audio signal always comes through full strength, and essentially you're adding in the delays, and the strength of those delays is based off of the mode that you're using for it. So if you're in slap mode, then you're setting an actual level, an audio level. If you're in feedback mode, then your level is fixed, and you become more set on the actual percentage in terms of the feedback or the amount of feedback. And then in ping pong mode, you're bouncing the signals back and forth. So this is one way to operate the plugin from this end. Now, if you go to, say, something more like a vocal, we can actually call up the J37 as in a send return mode. So what I have here is I have a lead vocal track. I have a delay that is feeding off of that through a send. So my send level would be feeding off of the main vocal track and going into the J37 as a separate plugin.
Bound.
Okay, so what I want to do here right now, it's set to insert. So I want to go to send and return mode. So this will be only delays now. So okay, and then from here I can go to sync. I can separate the left and right side, and maybe try to do a similar type of thing. So maybe we'll just do eighth and dotted eighth or something like that.
Let me go. Bound.
So this would set the initial delay, again, or the delay level going through the plugin in slap mode. And then, of course, I can filter those delays from the top and the bottom with the high-pass, low-pass filter.
Let me go northward bound.
Right, and then I can kind of saturate those.
Stones to keep me to the ground 'cause I'm ready.
Right, and don't need that. And in this case, you're not really going to hear the flutter, but you can also play with the wow and flutter and get a little bit of modulation in there if you like. You can also work in feedback mode, and now these become...
Let me go northward bound. No stones to keep me.
And then there's also ping pong mode.
Let me go northward bound.
And you get the backup of that. You can also feed the...
Let me go.
what you can do is if you feed through the send into just one side versus the other, then what you can do is you can set the delay and make it a bit more of the traditional
Let me go.
into the traditional kind of slap mode that you would use for a tape machine, where you were feeding it in and then the output of that would be feeding back to the other side, and you would kind of add the delays accordingly. So those are the basic parameters in terms of working with the delays. And then, of course, with all of those delays, particularly in send and return mode, you can really get into just affecting the wet signal, just the delay signal, and go through all of the modulation controls, tape formulation, speed, saturation via input level or saturation control. You can even bring in tape hiss if it makes you feel good. All of that stuff is available to you. So there you have it. There is the J37 Tape Saturation plugin by Waves. It's a great one, and offers just a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of the different tonal characteristics and ways that you can shape the sound, distortion, modulation. A pretty comprehensive plugin for a tape emulation, and the best that I think I've ever seen. So thanks for tuning in to this video on the J37 Tape Saturation plugin by Waves.